Welcome back, everybody, to the Web Archiving Conference. This is the question and answer session for session number 4 on video and stream archiving. We had two presentations for this session. The first was the collection of streaming content in the Danish web archive, Netarkivet, at the Royal Danish Library. And that was by Andreas, Lenander, Aegidius, and also submitted along with Anders Klindt Myrvoll, who's here as well. And number 2 was video archiving and playback in the Wayback machine, presented by Sawood from the Internet Archive. I may have missed some general maintenance, but I remind people to enter their questions into the Q&A and also to please vote on other people's questions. And with that, I'm going to let the speakers give a brief recap of what their talk was about, starting with Andreas, please.
Thank you very much, Meghan. Pleasure to be here. And a short recap would be that having been involved in projects concerning how do we get access to videos from public service media using various methods, that being either they upload via FTP or we get access to their content via an API. I had a chance to do a research project to see how can we get what we do not get from those methods, and that would be looking into the web archive, and then that would be looking at websites. And we know that all most streaming services have presentation sites, they have apps of various kinds across a multitude of platforms. So the project that I'm currently engaged in, which is also why this is what I've presented in the video, are preliminary findings, is all about trying to map what can we actually find that's relevant to streaming in the Danish web archive. And we took an open explorative approach looking at stream asterisk, so a very open text search, which produced 3 million results, and then also scoping it in towards streaming service and streaming, which is also streaming tjeneste and dansk, and then trying to verify a method that's been proposed by other researchers to sort of, what do you call that? Yeah, again, map the evolution of the use of the term stream and streaming services in the Danish web archive. And using Solar Wayback, we've been able to get some initial insights, and it's been guiding our way towards doing some extraction, and we're on the cusp of some data cleaning and some data treatment in order to get a view of how this has evolved. And I'll give a few examples of that using n-grams from the Solar Wayback index.
Thank you so much for that recap. And Sawood?
Hello. Hi, I'm Sawood from Wayback Machine team, and I'm presenting here on behalf of the whole Wayback Machine team. So at the Internet Archive in Wayback Machine, we archive a lot of videos, and there are 2 types of videos on the web. One that are easy to archive, like using simple standard HTML video tag with source pointing to the video file, and we can capture them using traditional tools. But then the other type is where they use fancy JavaScript and change the video stream on the fly depending on network conditions and user preferences and whatnot. Archiving those videos and playing back is tricky. Sometimes those URLs change over time, so it's not stable. And we archive both types of videos. So this talk basically goes through the whole entire process that we use to deal with these tricky situations and with some out-of-band mechanism put into the system to archive those. Along with archiving a ton of videos, we also archive a lot of metadata associated with those videos that can be useful in future for research purposes. The slide goes through all these things in more detail. We also have a dashboard that looks into the metadata that we archive periodically and aggregate those things. That's how we get to see what we are archiving, and we learn more about it. And then we use that information to then improve our process further. Identify certain issues or things where we were wasting our resources. We can put it to work on better things more efficiently. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you so much. Just a reminder again to our audience to use the Q&A function. I'm looking forward to hearing what questions all of the attendees are going to bring to the table. I'm going to start out with a question for Sawood. At the beginning of your video, you have a really great explanation of the difference between what a static video embed is and what it entails to archive, and what a streaming video is and how that's different. And as a librarian and as someone who interacts a lot with the public who make the websites, I'm very curious to know what would make videos more archivable. Would you recommend that website owners directly embed MP4s into the code of their website? Why or why not? And would you say that there's like a best practice for videos on the web and for archiving them that could be shared between a web developer and a web archivist?
So I would suggest for better archivability, if people use standard primitives provided by HTML standards, like video tag with source pointing to an MP4 or whatever video format that is widely supported, that will be the easiest thing to archive. But it is also possible, if the videos are larger, then perhaps it's not wise to embed the whole large files, but chopped in smaller pieces. And there are formats around that, like M3U8 is a standard mechanism to basically provide smaller pieces, and then Seek becomes more easier and not as much workload on the server. But I think this invites for a broader engagement from this web archiving community, actually. Not only video archiving, but there are many situations where web standards become standards without the consideration of their archivability. If you read RFCs from IETF or W3C standard documents, they draft, as they evolve, you'll find sections like security considerations, privacy considerations, scalability issues, and all sorts of things like user ease of use and whatnot. They generally never talk about archivability concerns or considerations, right? And this is, I think, an opportunity for us to kind of step in those conversations and say, hey, could you please also consider this? So from the day when the standards are evolving, they have this thing in mind as well, and how the ecosystem evolves from there. Educating web developers after the fact is tricky, and I think we are just catching up. Whatever is out there, we are trying to adapt to it and trying to make something work around it.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really great point. I think the archivability comes later. People are thinking about their needs in making a web archive or making a website and experiencing the web. And this kind of leads me into my first question for Andreas, which is that at the end of your presentation, you mused about how personalized streaming experiences might be captured in the historical record. And I'm curious, why is it important to represent that fluidity of personalized streaming experience in web archives?
Well, we have legal deposit laws stating that anything published will have to be deposited at the institutions that caretake our cultural heritage. So to give an analog example, even though that doesn't really make sense, you could say a book published with several genre, let's say genre-specific front covers ought all to be deposited. And using that analog, all graphical user interfaces of these applications ought also to be, I know it might be a fast stretch, but in another way, you could say that we all see individual search results. So if either of us search on a specific term using straining my brain to not say Google, so let's just say Google, then we'd get various results based on our search histories booked in trackers. And I ask Anders, why haven't we harvested all the trackers? And that's the invisible web. So what I was looking for is there a way? So this is a glint of the invisible web taking its turn to be shown to each of us in various. So it's a diamond that shines in various ways, and how, if we can't have the entire diamond, can we at least take a photo of it from various angles, I'd say.
Yeah, I love that perspective about trying to capture the hidden elements of the web. Speaking of hidden elements, I think when we are archiving videos and we've got this huge web archive of just works and all the stuff in the works, the information about what's in those works can get lost. So that brings me to Sawood. You have this dashboard that can take information and describe what is it that has been added to the Wayback Machine. And have you used those insights to iterate on the collecting process? You know, what did you find? What were you missing?
So yes, I mean, one thing is like there have been some statistics about general web pages, like over the time, the number of page requisites like images and CSS, JavaScript, and all that kind of make up a web page. That number is growing bigger and bigger. This is no different for videos either. And when we archive, like, I mean, archiving one video means like archiving or creating hundreds of work records, not just for the video itself, but all sorts of metadata and, you know, page requisites and all the wrappers around it to point to it, and archiving it in a way that kind of, you know, is well represented, and it's kind of, you know, it's playbackable, and also it gives plethora of information for researchers in the future, like things like video, if it comes with transcripts in like hundreds of languages, you archive all of them individually, you know, various thumbnails, or, you know, for seeking at different positions, there are images associated to that we archive. There is a bunch of things. But one thing that we get from using things like YouTube DL, it gives us you know, metadata like title, channel name, number of views, and also description, all sorts of other you know, metadata about the video. We take that, transform into a JSON format, put it in WARC file. But that is describing one video at a time. Then we go through it and we create like hourly or daily you know, statistics on those, and that's what we show in our dashboard. And when what we see in that the dashboard tells us where we are heading. Sometimes initially it's like a dark box that we don't know what's inside, but when you start looking at these aggregated you know, highlights, then you get to learn that from there. So a few things that we learned and we improved on is we realized like there were like really long streams, sometimes like 24-hour long videos, and we were archiving those. And when we looked into those, some were like, you know, for example, streaming games, or there is some, you know, chanting going on in Himalayas, or there is a water dripping from somewhere and someone is recording and streaming that. And so I don't know, I mean, this might be valuable for some people, but not for, there is like limited amount of resources we have. And if you want to use that storage and other things for, you know, something more valuable, you might want to figure out these videos and just learn their signatures and set them aside and archive something else, like something like a mid-sized videos, like 10, 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long, 30 minutes long videos, focus on those. But video size and their length are not generally the only indicators that we can use. There are things like categories, like, for example, we decided not to archive gaming videos. A lot of people were basically gaming and streaming their gaming experience. And I mean, sure, there could be a few samples in the archive that would be helpful, but not necessarily archiving every single gamer's stream is a great idea. And we keep learning as we refine these things more and more. We learn more, but we do not try to have like hard rules like, hey, if the video length is more than this or size is more than this, don't archive it, because there will be some genuine videos that would want to archive. Like there is a congressional hearing or something going on, and doesn't matter how long it is, maybe it is for public good and we want to archive those. So that's how the system operates, and we are kind of constantly learning from it and improving the system.
Thank you. Yes, I had a question about selection, and so that was really interesting to hear about ruling out everyone's 24-hour gameplay of Halo or something. So thank you. I have one last question for Andreas before I move to the audience Q&A. So please enter your questions, and looking forward to getting to those. Thinking back to the first session this morning where Anders was, along with other folks who were talking about full text search, I'm curious to hear from the researcher's perspective, is it fair to say that full text search of web archives was central to your research approach, Andreas?
Oh, very much so. On a personal level, as a researcher visiting or gaining access to the web archive for the first time, definitely so. It made it much more intuitive to do searches and see what, also since I apply an open explorative approach, doing a lot of different searches and seeing how does that pan out, and how are the results, and also seeing how one search result is in one data field and another search result is in a different data field, and learning to do different types of search strings was immensely informative. Although the method that we were verifying, proposed by other researchers, was done in 2018 before Solar Wayback was implemented at the Danish Royal Danish Library. So they actually didn't do this, but for me personally, this was immensely helpful, since I could do what felt like intuitive search. I mentioned that it felt like an intuitive searches, but you'd have to be skilled and willing to do searches. And I know some researchers won't do that. They would want a refined search string and then just hand over the results, please. But I went crazy, I must say.
Yeah, no, it's really good to hear, because I know a lot of us who are maybe in the audience are advocating to have full text search implemented in our home institutions. And so having these researcher use cases is really important for us to demonstrate need. So thank you. And with that, I'll move to some of the Q&A. Our first question is from Tobias, who asks, Sawood, for which video formats and streaming services does your video archiving pipeline work? Is it just downloadable videos and YouTube videos?
So I mean, regular downloadable videos, of course, that works fine. We don't have to go through any specialized pipeline for those things. But services like YouTube and platforms that kind of use more JavaScripty mechanism and players, that is the tricky thing, and that's why we try to have like this out of band setup to extract the information. And currently, the way we handle that is we use YouTube DL, but we don't use YouTube DL to archive the video. We just get YouTube DL to give us the metadata, and in that metadata, we also get all sorts of different URLs that point to different formats of videos that are available at that time. Like, I mean, YouTube derives various formats in different, resolutions and whatnot. And currently, what we are trying to choose is like, we don't go the super highest resolution or the crappy resolution either. We try to kind of, strike a balance in quality and file size. And we choose at least one format from different formats that are available from there. And we archive that, and we do some gluing together so that the URL is now discoverable, that this video belongs to that particular playback URL. I mean, in theory, our system should support every video platform that is known or that works using YouTube DL, but of course there is more to do with other platforms when there are specialized cases.
Yeah. While we're talking about intake of video, Amanda asks how erroneous content is treated when collecting and optimizing playback. Does erroneous material take up a lot of space?
Well, sometimes they do. And I mean, erroneous could be many things, right? I mean, it's like not properly downloaded, or certain critical pieces were missing that would kind of, render the data useless as it won't play back. And it's not just videos, it happens all over the place. Like, you are archiving a web page that has tons of JavaScript, and there is one JavaScript file that was critical that has like this condition, like, hey, run this piece and render everything. Now you got all the information in the HTML, but it's not showing anything because the JavaScript that was telling everything to be rendered on the page that is missing, right? So it happens with videos as well. And we try to do some QA to identify those videos and see what we can do about them. And if there is anything we can fix them, that's fine. If not, then that's like data that is in there in those WARC files. We don't necessarily throw them away or anything. They can be useful at some point. The other thing is, like, you didn't want to archive certain videos and they somehow got archived. I mean, for that, we have exclusion systems that we put in place to not serve them in the future.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Our next question is from Melissa Wertheimer. She asks, continuing with selection, if the public nominates video content to the Wayback Machine that is already archived elsewhere, such as a government repository, which is public, is a decision made not to use resources to archive that content? And I suppose that was for Sawood from the internet.
Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah. Melissa Wertheimer is asking about selection of content coming into the pipeline. So if a member of the public nominates video content to the Wayback Machine that's already archived elsewhere, like in a public facing government repository, is a decision made not to use resources to archive that content? Or do you kind of embrace redundancy?
We generally do not check external sources. That will make the whole process very slow when you start checking for every single video where it is archived. That slows everything down. So we generally make our own decisions independently. And we do have a database which we use as scene check, because video is something that is like a large file, and we do not want to archive it again and again. So if it is archived once, we just live with that. We do not try to re-archive it. But that is our internal system. We do not check external services for that. And I think redundancy in this case is better.
Gotcha. Yeah. Though the Wayback Machine is a really big operation. And so I'm going to interject a question for Andreas in here about the scope of web archives and how large they are. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about that open explorative approach open explorative approach that you were using, and what were the challenges and benefits of this approach with working with Netarkivet, like streaming services in Netarkivet, like so much data?
Yeah, it turned out to be a lot of data. I didn't know, but we could assume a lot of things, of course. And I talked to Anders previously about decisions made at an earlier stage about when and how and when not to harvest videos for the web archive. A lot of decision has been made or elaborate negotiations has been made in order to make sure that we have streamlined deals with identified publishers so that we have a lot of videos going in other streams. But when I do a content type content type search for videos in the web archive, we still get a few million, close to 10 million hits. And then it's really interesting to see then what is actually ending up in the web archive and for what reasons. And this I wouldn't have known if I hadn't had this explorative approach, doing various types of searches that interject in various ways. And just looking for the term stream asterisk means that we get a lot of hits that relate to something that's not at all related to streaming services. We get a lot of what I would have thought would be HTML tags. It turned out that stream is not an HTML tag as far as I could clarify. But then the term has been used in various other ways. And this is also part of mapping and looking into the evolution of the use of this term. And of course, we can see that it begins to spike during the 2010s as we see the introduction of more, you could say, official and legitimate or professional streaming services. But this also means that we do not see the transition from torrent downloading towards progressive torrent downloading, which is sort of in the piracy domain of streaming, where we also have streaming, even though it's not, they don't label themselves streaming services. It's a whole different game, but it's still in many ways a dimension of streaming. So this maybe I'm also curious for, yeah.
And maybe here it's a bit different with your research question, but for instance, in Solo Wayback, probably also a lot of other free text search, you can do like a proximity search. So you could search for video piracy, torrent download, or whatever kind. If you had some kind of, okay, this is a telltale, this is illegal download going on here, whatever, illegal streaming, and then you make sure that you don't get all the wrong streaming. So you can just say, okay, let's have the word streaming and the word piracy, and they have to be like 3 words from each other or something like that. Then you'll kind of narrow it down a bit, so you can that's pretty powerful, because you would have a big file with all kinds of content from a news site, and then you have the bad news about something in the bottom, and you have streaming on the top, and it could even be like a drop-down list with streaming just being harvested each time you make a front page or something. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of narrow it down a bit if you want.
No, yeah, I'm thinking now about, this is a good reason to have robust metadata, and you could facet your searches in order to kind of narrow down your results. Just check the Q&A. One last thing on that note, are there any kind of tips that you might have for cultural heritage workers to better describe this streaming video content in a way that will make it more clear and accessible for researchers in the media field? And for Andreas and Anders, maybe.
Yes. Well, the fascinating and also very problematic thing about the term streaming is that it's been hijacked and used very opportunistically by anybody who's using the access model, which is giving access to cultural content on a subscription basis or any other means. So I could do a parallel project just on the term subscription. So it's really, really difficult to say what does this entail and what we leave out. But of course, that's part of the description of how we see in the evolution of the term being used in web archives. And as a media researcher, looking forward for others to look backward, it's really, really difficult. I just hope that somehow our attempts to try and describe and map the evolution of the term will be useful for others at a later stage to see, okay, they did a sort of a slice analysis and had a look, and this would inform going forward. As Sawood pointed out, using the HTML tag video is one way to go about it. There's video, and then as Anders just pointed out, if we could do proximity searches for the tag video along with anything remotely related to streaming, then we are along good ways. But then we would want the tag book or the tag music as well in order to see streaming in other domains, not just related to video.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. Anders, did you have something to add? I see that you've unmuted.
No, I think you should answer Andy's question first, but I have a question about YouTube and Google and how they treat us, but maybe we can take that afterwards.
Maybe we'll get to that.
Yeah, maybe.
From Andy Jackson for Sawood, how is the association between player pages and archive videos captured in the work files? Or does that association live outside the works? Is this an area where we should be standardizing how we store these relationships?
Yes, so this is sure someone experienced is coming with this question, obviously. Yeah, YouTube playback pages generally have an ID in the URL, right? And that should identify the video. However, the various formats of videos that are playing back on that playback page, they don't have traces of that ID. So even if we try to get those videos URLs using YouTube DL, it's not easy to glue them together or relate them together. So what we do before, once we identify those URLs, we stick the YouTube video ID in the video URL at the end as a query parameter, which is then ignored by YouTube. But now we have archived a URL that is not necessarily the original URL. However, we can then figure it out and index it that way later. So this is our current solution. We are not necessarily happy with this mechanism. And this is definitely something that we would love to have a conversation and standardize it. And, I mean, the whole video archiving space is very poorly standardized because it's a moving thing. It's like ever evolving. Everyone is changing their platform. So it's difficult for us to come up with like a stable solution for this. And I think we'll be more than happy to discuss what we have done, what is done in the rest of the Iipc community, and where we can take it. And it is problematic because the WARC files that we create right now, it won't be very well understood or played by anyone else if we share it, or the same is true the other way as well. If someone else archives videos using their own techniques, and it won't play back in our system. So standardization will certainly be very welcome to me.
Thank you so much, Sawood. I am being pinged that we only have 2 minutes left. So I want to thank all of the presenters for speaking here and answering our questions. And I want to thank the audience for joining.